Good evening and welcome to another episode of Bophelong. I am your host, Thulani Mbatha. The stares, the little whispers of shock, and the pointing of fingers when they aren't looking are the daily encounters of people living with disabilities. Due to this, many find it hard to fit in, while others, such as Kgololo, sees these as minor challenges that serve as motivation for them to be the greatest that they can be. Today, we look at the story of the 24-year-old Paralympic champion and a law student who left us here on Bophelong speechless after we visited his home in Dawn Park. Look at this.
Meet Kgololo from Dawn Park, east of Johannesburg. At the age of 9, his mother got the fright of her life when he lost both his arms.
Uthe mayifika nje unhlanhla ngitshela ukuthi nje wavesana wathi mayingena nje wathi mama usamukelo. So njengoba ngisho ngithi bekumntwana othanda nokudlala estradini yabona makuza imoto avesana phasa ibhola liphasele ngale yabo abese yaligijimisa yabona ngicabange nje lokho ukuthi mayithi mama usamukelo kimi kwafika ukuthi ushayiswe imoto yabona wathi mama akusiyimoto ugesi ngadideka ke manje ukuthi ugesi nosamukelo estradini ukuthi kuhlangana kanjani yabona ngithemba ngithi ngiyaphuma ngiphumela ngaphandle ngithi ngiyabheka nje estradini lapha ngabona nje kushunqa intuthu uyasithema sifika lapha yana ngathola nje ukuthi nje babambe ilento le idrada lengaphakathi kwetayere lemoto yabona kushuthi nje kwakunetayere lalishile lapho kwaphuma lamadrada khona so kushuthi nje ubambe le drada so then le mino yonke ishile nje iyanqamuka so and then la imkhathile nje so lisilenga lesisandla so ngamathambo lawa ashila mnyama nje kwabona ungathatha amathambo walahlela emlilweni kuyinto enjalo ashile sishile nje isandla lesi then ke ngamthola nje elele ewomile kahle kahle nje ngithole nje kuyisidumbu vele ngavesane nje ngabaleka ngathi ngiyabaleka ngawa yiloko nje ngangikwenza lapho ngalelo langa ngangibaleka ngiwa ngithi ngiyabaleka ngiyawa amandla wekho vele bangibamba ke bangiphuzisa amanzi bangisondeza ngasemntwaneni nabo makhelwane baphuma nje ngalelo langa lelo nje langa ngathi nje lalibekelwe nje ukuthi makungenzeka into eso kufanele abo makhelwane bakho babeseduze nawe ngoba ngithe vele ngifika abanye babesebevele sebekhona yabona sebegcwele nje bezama ukuthi bamkhiphe lawo madradi lapho yabona so ke beza nengubo ke bamkhava ke nje ukuthi kushuthi bathi mawushila kumele ngithole ukubanda kakhulu yabona uthole nje nokufuda malanyana so babemkhava ngengubo hayi ke ngabona kahle ukuthi ayakasekho ayingascreama ke lapha ayingascreama nje then after that ke sazama indlela yokuthi kufonelwe ambulance kodwa ke ambulance ngathi yabalate.
Kgololo was then rushed to a nearby hospital where he stayed for 9 months. The intensity of 11,000 volts from the electric pylon that had run through his body are said to have been enough to burn down 24 houses. His survival was a miracle, but his chances of living were slim.
The way nje ayishe ngakhona wayeshile yabo wayeshila indaba okudlala ngoba njengoba eso akusizandla kuphela futhi nje nale party le washa nje la kwavuleka yabona wathi mayiphefumula nje kube ngathi inhliziyo lezi uphumela ngaphandle namaphaphu kuleli side leli nje wahlubeka amathambo wonke elala ayihleli ngaphandle eshile nala inkabeni washa nomlenze nje wayeshile washa ekhanda kwavuleka indlebe le yayisukile kahle kahle iphakeme nje ila.
Kgololo lay in hospital with his injuries so severe that doctors decided to amputate both his forearms. This aggravated tensions and challenges at home.
During this sikhathi ubesithenze besinzima mama bokumele ayida like every day 2 times a day like more 3 as well as now 7 so you can imagine like financial ukuthi like izinto beziba kanjani because bokumele bamphathele something like every time ayada nathi besifunda like esikoleni so yabo kunzima but more especially financially na emotional.
Eventually, he returned home to a family that struggled with dealing with a disabled child that was almost a shadow of who he was as an able-bodied little boy.
So I had ukuthi ngilale naye, so ukuthi ngimgade ebusuku ukuthi uright. I had to make sure ukuthi makathena akathunukeki because his whole body begcwele ama-bandage and everything like that. So bokumele ngimgade ukuthi okay fine, ulele kahle, ingubo zise right, makafuna ukuyochama, you know, can I assist you? Uchama ufuna ukudla ngikwenzele, yabo. So all those type of things I had to be very supportive. Ufuna ukugeza, but bengisaba by then because inyanya sabilonda.
Growing up for Samkelo came with many trials and tribulations.
It was different because people would now, you know, stop and stare and start asking questions. You know, that didn't happen before. But whatever treatment or response that I got from them was usually based on, you know, personality.
Going to Hope School with other disabled children throughout his primary and secondary phase made it easier for him to accept the changes in his life.
Immediately after Ngiphume Sibhedlela, I went to school. I was in grade 4. I went to a disabled school. When I got there were like lots and lots of other disabled people who, a lot of them were actually in worse conditions than me. You know, so I realized, you know what, even though this is bad, but other people have it worse than me.
University life brought about much relief and a new lease on life for the young and ambitious Samkelo.
I enjoyed my varsity life, like it was the best. I think a lot of people were like disability blind, you know, in a sense that they did not treat me based on my disability, but again, it was Samkelo, the way angakhona.
The loss of his hands could have caused Samkelo to drop into a well of depression. Instead, he discovered his passion for athletics. How far would his sporting career go? Would Samkelo be able to balance sports and his studies? Would he be able to reach the many goals he had set for himself?
After the break, we continue our journey with Samkelo Radebe to see how he overcome his challenges. Stay with us. You're still watching Bophelong. Samkelo Radebe is now a success in his own right. It is the journey to success that holds the essence of his life story.
Many of you have heard of him through various media platforms. After his victory at the Commonwealth Games, we took this opportunity to find out about who Samkelo Radebe is.
I'm a mama's boy, you know, like ish. That's probably not gonna help me score a lot of girls. Family man, you know, family man. I uphold my values. Yo, dude, I'm crazy about my family. You know, I'm crazy about them. I'm an uncle, and I'm not very strict. I'm like one of those crazy, awesome uncles. I used to be a super athlete. I talk a lot. A lot of the time, people say I talk nonsense, which is okay because I do talk a lot of nonsense. But I think as an all-rounder, like I'm just one of those approachable people, friendly, funny.
He has over 50 gold medals and scooped the Gauteng Sportsman of the Year award, beating popular Caster Semenya mid-last year. He took silver in 2011 at the Commonwealth Games in India and holds national records of 11.10 seconds for 100 meters and 23.12 seconds for 200 meters. The year 2014 came with difficult decision-making for the 24-year-old. Samkelo decided to put his sporting career on hold and focus on completing his degree in law at the University of Johannesburg. Currently, he works for Vexman Law Firm, doing his articles.
My goal was when I left high school, I wanted to compete at the Paralympics. And the only way for me to do that was to have someone that's going to fund me for it, because I wouldn't have the money for that, you know. So I had to go to university. I was at the University of Johannesburg, and I had a sports bursary which actually saw me through all the way to Paralympics, living my dream. But the most important thing out of all of that was for me to walk out of there with a degree. You know, I wanted to walk out of there with a qualification, something that I can have for the rest of my life, you know, go into a career that will sustain me for the rest of my life, you know. And looking at athletics, I was at the top of my game, and I couldn't say the future is bright. I was there, I was at the top, but, you know, there was really nothing. There's no going higher than that. You know what I mean? So here I'm right at the bottom, but I can tell you that the future is bright. I've got so many heavy medals, but the piece of paper that I attained in varsity is actually, it weighs much, much more than those 50-something medals that I have, and this will keep me going for the rest of my life.
Approximately 5 million South Africans are disabled. This is around 1 in 10 South Africans. Despite this, less than 1% of all people employed in this country are those with disability. The lack of representation of people with disability in the workplace was also a factor for Samkelo, who found himself as the only disabled person at his workplace.
Look, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's something new for me. So here and there I tend to battle, I tend to get tired bit quicker than everyone else. My work pace is slightly a bit slower than that of a person with hands, and they've obviously made means to try and reasonably accommodate me. I have that dragon system that I use. Instead of sitting and typing throughout the whole day, I can just talk to the computer, and it writes everything for me, and I just correct it here and there. So there's a lot that I'm still gonna learn about the challenges I'm going to face here at work, and there's no written book on how a person with hands struggles at work. It's something that we all going to learn at the same time, and we need to find ways around it.
His success comes with no surprise to his colleague Naledi Mutsiri, who sees him as more than just a hard worker.
Naledi?
Hey Sam. What do you have for me? He adds value, and I mean, that's at the end of the day, we are working here, and it's important to have somebody who adds value to the team. So I see him doing something big. Okay, I hope he'll still be with us, because I think he's a candidate attorney who is worth keeping.
Despite the views of others, Samkelo can do anything he sets his mind on, even the little things like driving. When he's not in the field practicing or the office, he spends his time motivating youngsters.
I've done talks at schools, churches, community events, coaching events. Sure, I can talk anyway. I'm always available, especially on weekends, to do motivational talks, to guide young people, young aspiring sports people. So it's not just athletics, but sports in general. And even if it's not sports people, I think I have a story that has the power to just inspire anybody.
Amongst his list of accomplishments is climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in 2007 with the organization Children of Fire to promote awareness for burn survivors.
I think in day one I'm driver or some girl. Okay ngiphila nesikhathi esibayo, but into athanda ukuyisho ukuthi uzama ukwenza better than abantu abanezandla. Ngiyathola. So if evuthona ushaya ipapa lakho libe njanjani wena ngoba unezandla angalenza even better. So ile into driver, whatever into ayenzayo utry ukuthi ayenze even better, because abantu abaningi they expect less from yena and always provide more. Ngiyathola. So I think ile into driver ukuthi ufuna ukachieve more than abantu laba able kahle kahle.
Ngifisela nje impilo enhle, ngifisela impilo ende ngoba uzimisele, ufundile, waphasa esikoleni, wahamba e-university, efundele ukuba yi-law, enza i-law, right, fine, uphasile manje right kuko konke nje akwenzayo nje ngithi uNkulunkulu amenze kahle.
With all his achievements, there is no telling what he will do next. It appears the world is his oyster. His disability does not hinder his potential.
Wow, indeed, we all could take a page out of Samkelo's book, but after the break, we are joined in studio by a poet and a motivational speaker, Makomele Manaka. Stay tuned right here on Bophelong. Welcome back to Bophelong. Before the break, we met Samkelo, who was electrocuted by an electric pylon as a child. We have decided to share with you some safety tips with regards to electric pylon in your area. Never build or store material under power wires. When carrying an aluminum ladder, long lengths or pipe of any metal object, keep them as horizontal as possible. Flying kites near power lines is extremely dangerous to the kite flyer and can disrupt power to other consumers. Teach your children to never climb on power pylons on any roof or near wires. Be sure to report any suspected fault. Be cautious at all times. Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. You're still watching Bophelong with me, Bophelong Mulebati, and I'm now joined by Mac Manaka, a social commentator and a poet. Mac, welcome to Bophelong.
Well, my sister.
Yeah, Lebo, if you can just join us this afternoon. Mac, today we're talking about social cohesion and how far we are as a society in terms of being accommodating and being a versatile society that we are in a way that is not intrusive to the other people. So what I would like to ask you is, what is your definition of social cohesion, how you understand it?
Well, I think cohesion is something else. It's more accountability, rather, you know, accounting for mistakes that we make, you know, instead of pointing fingers and blaming other people for our mistakes. Like what's happening with our president, in all honesty, when he says it's not, he didn't know that this was happening to his house and whatnot. I mean, how could he not know? You know, I mean, accountability is very much important, you know, especially as human beings. It's a human flaw that we want to point fingers and blame instead of looking at ourselves, you know. I mean, Domatera once said to me that that when you point one finger, you've got three fingers pointing back at you. So that's what I think needs to really be addressed properly from home, that as soon as they're accountable for whatever that they actually do, you know, they're responsible for that kind of a situation. And this is where we can begin the discussion of social cohesion, honestly.
Meg, today we're looking at a life of a young man who's done incredibly well in terms of athletics and as a law student, and his name is Samkelo Radebe, who, you know, has lived life regardless of the circumstances in life. So what I should have started with earlier is, how as a society are we accommodating to people that are not of the same race as us, gender, maybe perhaps different disability? How are we in terms of being accommodating in that sense? I guess that's what I want to say about social cohesion, trying to be accommodating and inclusive to other people.
Well, you know, first, how do we accommodate ourselves?
Yes.
How are we at peace with who we are as a people, as an individual, rather? Are you really honestly happy with yourself? How much of yourself do you really know? You know, I mean, Malcolm X once said that we cannot start being acceptable to others without first being acceptable to ourselves. So how do I actually begin to be accepted by society without first accepting myself?
Yes.
You understand? And this is a question that is posed to each and everybody across the color spectrum, across the gender, race, across all of that, across all politics. How acceptable are you to your own self?
So what you're saying is that it's not a you and I, it's a we type of thing. It starts with you. You teach people how to treat you.
Yep.
So that's what you're bringing it back to. And Meg, one of the things that I learned about society and, you know, where we come from as a nation with the democracy that's still very young, is that also as a nation we're still growing. So we're still learning about diversity. We're still learning about people being individuals. So in a sense, we are in a stage where we are looking at one another and say, okay, so this is the path that we're paving for the next generations to come. So my question that I want to ask you is that, what do you think we should be doing? How do we even begin to teach each other about who we are, what we stand for? You know, should we be having organizations for people with disabilities, for gender equality? Are we on the right track?
Well, you know, my sister, to be honest, mobilization in any way started with art. It starts with art, actually. You know, we need to start in our art, honestly.
Art, how do you mean by art?
Art is in theater, as in music, as in poetry, as in literature, as in all forms of art, you know, because we come from the people and we see what's happening, you know, because art can only influence change, you know. So if we actually start advocating social responsibilities, what needs to happen, creating responsible thinkers within our communities and responsible people, it needs to be addressed on the fore, and then from then on we actually start mobilizing we start actually getting organizations and all sorts, because organizations are there basically. Organizations will be built, organizations will be done, but within organizations there are fractions, within organizations there's politics, within those fractions there's some sort of friction. Though on stage, when you're addressing people, so
you're saying we must create an environment where everyone is not feel like they're being pressured into something.
Exactly.
We should all be, you know.
Exactly. And it all begins with art. In all honesty, I won't lie to you, my sister.
I wouldn't have seen it that way.
It is every child's birthright. Art is every child's birthright. Same thing as education. It is every South African child's birthright. Period.
So Meg, I wanted to also ask you, what as we as people, you know, as either different gender or race or culture, what do you think we because I still feel like we haven't achieved something here. I'm trying to say, should there be a division? For example, you will have a certain school that just caters for people with disability, and you'll have the so-called normal school. Should there still be such? What are we doing that's not contributing to what we're trying to achieve?
Are you talking about inclusion?
Yes.
Ash, my sister, you know what? This is one of the most difficult things, actually, because before we talk about inclusion, first we must also talk about accessibility and, actually, like I said earlier on, acceptance, you know?
Okay.
First understanding, okay, at home, you know, at home. First, we must start there at home, you know, how our families view disability, you know, from inside the house first, and then we'll deal with what the street thinks of what disability really is, you know, and from then on we move into the country, what the country really thinks of disability. So accessibility in terms of information, you know, of how to deal with a child that does not really talk by the age of 10. Because this child doesn't listen, you know, or why gets you know. Before we even get to the schools part, I mean, hey, before we get to the inclusion of the schools, man, we must first start inclusion at home. I want to break down those barriers of which society has put onto which society has put really there. And for disability is a social leper, is a punishment from God. I don't understand why there should be some sort of religious connotation to a physical limitation, you know?
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Mac. And I would just have to have you here so we can address that and more. But unfortunately, we have come to the end of our program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
remember, you can join the conversation on Twitter at Bophelong Show. You can also send us an email, bophelong@sabc.co.za. As for me, let's do this again next week, Saturday at 5:30, and tomorrow is the repeat at 12:30. Goodbye.